Cathy Sweeney, you are UCC's Writer-in-Residence for 2022. First of all, we're just going to get started with a couple of details about yourself, so tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Great, well, I'm just so utterly delighted to be the UCC Writer-in-Residence for 2022. It's a huge honour, and I come after a lot of extremely well-respected names, so if anyone has seen me, I'm the person who's wandering around the campus, staring at everything, taking in the daffodils coming up and the beautiful buildings, and sitting on the benches and really not doing very much except wallowing in the beauty. It's a gorgeous campus. Yeah, it's so far been a wonderful experience and a huge privilege.
Could you give people an idea of when you started writing?
Sure. Well, it's really interesting at the moment because it's all coming back to me as I am sitting in the room with the 16 students that are part of my group on the MA in Creative Writing. And I think once you touch base in any way with an experience that you've had before, it just so brings you right back. It's the Proustian idea. So I feel I'm both outside the writer-in-residence, but I'm also them sitting around the table. So it's been kind of quite great that way, and the students are just really super, and so far it's been a wonderful experience. I'm enjoying the whole thing of like selecting readings and looking at their work and thinking about it from both sides, both the writer and teacher. I started writing quite late. I did a degree in English back in the day in Trinity, and I went on to teach English, but I was well into my 30s when I thought about writing. I think I just don't know why it didn't occur to me, but it didn't really. But I got hooked quite quickly, and I started writing short stories, mainly the odd essay, and submitted them to journals, and it just became integrated very quickly into part of my world. As time went on, I gave it at least a day a week. I used to call it the Carver Day after Raymond Carver, because I'd read that he had this idea that if he wanted to write a short story, he needed a day where when he got up in the morning until he went to bed that night, there would be no interruptions. Now, even if he lay around doing nothing, it was just, that was the day. And I started taking Saturdays that way, that I would not have any plans and pretty much not contact people or be contactable. And then stuff that would maybe be brewing during the week, might come to the surface. And there were just great days. I think it's just, selfishness is very much part of being a writer, and I wallowed in it. It came quite naturally to me when I got into it. And then, Isabel, time goes on, and I got an email from Declan Mead, who had published a good few of my stories by then, saying, will we put a collection together? And that, it sounds very simple, but that kind of was it. And that's how Modern Times came about. And there wasn't a huge amount for Declan to do with it, but he did give it the title, which I loved, and he did order the stories and select them. Then I had a contract to write a novel, and I went off for the kind of past 2 years, 18 months, and lived in a very remote village with very little distraction, which kind of suited the pandemic anyway, and wrote a novel called Breakdown. So I've just kind of come out of that. And here I am in Cork, just because after the novel, I did feel that I'd gone into a little bit onto emptying the petrol tank. So I'm really enjoying, I went to the cinema for the first time at the weekend in the Triskel Art Centre, and I went to a concert the week before. And I'm just stacking up the creativity and enjoying being around writers, obviously Danny in the department and Liz, and Matthew Gedden, and meeting different people in Cork. There's a lot of writers in Cork, Emma Ryan and Danielle McLaughlin and my students, and it's really good. Yeah.
In terms of creative process, like I noticed you said you were stacking up on the creativity there.
Yeah.
Could you just describe a little bit of what that means?
Sure, yeah. Well, I don't know what it means for other people because I don't know how other people work, but I think I work in dialogue with the world. So a lot of my short stories would come from perhaps a visual piece, maybe going to an exhibition or something I'd read or anything. Even I have a story called The Birthday Present about a wife who gives her husband a sex doll for his birthday. And I think I'd seen a documentary about sex dolls, and it just, it's just something. And so I tend to have like the oddest thoughts around quite ordinary things, but I do need to be drifting around in a particular state of mental relaxation. We all have ordinary lives, and they're not all full of drifting around in that kind of state. But it's a receptivity to stray thoughts. It's a kind of openness, and I'm cultivating it at the moment. I mean, I have a very kind of strong project in mind this year. While I'm here in UCC, it's something I want to write on a particular moment in the life of Oscar Wilde, but it's quite an abstract concept, and I'm building it around canonical hours, vespers, matins, and so on. So a lot of it is mood and atmosphere. So that receptivity to sensation, and not to be tight in my brain or just working down a sort of to-do list of ideas, or like I keep wanting to get lost, to go the wrong way or sit in the wrong seat or get on the wrong bus, so that I can have some mental adventure. Because I suppose with all of us, to write a novel, I really don't know that much about it, but I did notice that I seem to find myself developing quite ironclad routines and habits in order to just like get, arse onto chair and stay there. Seems to be the major trick to it. And now I'm trying to get out of that again.
It's almost like you're describing creative process like it goes in cycles. Like you have a cycle of going at it, and then a cycle of kind of getting stuff into you again so that you can do it again.
That's kind of exactly it, and I think that's what I'm trying to kind of cultivate. But it's also natural to me. I am very kind of monomaniacal. So if I want to do something, I was the kid that if I read the book, if I got a book and I got into a corner and I was like halfway through it, and someone wanted me to go and do something mundane like hang up clothes, I could feel quite violent. I don't think I'm a violent person. But if I'm doing something, I really want to just do it, so that you couldn't possibly work like that all the time. So there's cycles that are natural to me. And now I see myself as kind of, grazing. There's just so much stimulating beauty and interesting, activity around me at the moment. So I'm in that natural cycle of, trying to just get the little synapses to spark back together again.
With regards to starting out in terms of creativity, did you find it difficult to actually start being creative?
That's very interesting. I suppose it's about desire, ultimately, what motivates us. And I think that we can substitute our primitive or primary desires with many things. So I'm sure that my creativity was absolutely and completely being energized in other ways. I was a very passionate teacher, and I had other things going on in my life. So I think it's writing now, but I'm not a writer who thinks that necessarily I'll always be writing. It's just trying to be, part of the moment, in a sense of just fulfilling who the self is now. And I mean, now I'm just, I'm in a very luxurious position because I don't have huge levels of responsibility right this minute, having had much responsibility. So I'm kind of floating around and really enjoying writing and reading and language. But I could find myself in 10 years, absolutely obsessed with planting a garden. In some ways, I kind of hope that might be the case.
So would you say that creativity pervades through a lot of your life? Is creativity in more than one place in your life?
I think it's really interesting as well, and I don't really know because it's such an interesting question and I haven't really thought about it, but I think creativity to me is a state of being, not so much a production. So the writing for me came out of like very powerful, intense desire, not so much to tell stories, but to get out from underneath dominant narratives that I felt myself to be trapped in, almost like a fly in a web. which is why a lot of my stories are quite astray in terms of the way I think and write. But I think it's a state of being whereby it could find a channel in another means. I'm not sure, but I'm certainly not done with it. I'm certainly very absorbed in it. But what do we want from writing? What I want is the state of feeling something creative in me.
How have you found your interaction with the creative industries in Ireland?
I think I was kind of spoilt because Ireland is so rich with journals that support new writers, and also new writers outside of sort of traditional boxes of being necessarily young, new writers in any shape or form. And there is a kind of like a place to belong to or to feel part of, whether it's the Stinging Fly or the Dublin Review, the Tangerine in Belfast, Banshee magazine. They're just, I'll be leaving some out because there are just so many. And I think we're incredibly lucky because it really isn't like that. Even in the UK, they don't have quite as much of an outcrop as that. There's a lot of collegiality and solidarity around that, just meeting other people. Like, I can think of such important moments for me in terms of just confidence building, which is part of it. Like, these practical things are also part of it, and I hope I can bring some of that to my students. Like, there's the wonderful airy-fairy, wafting around creativity. There's also like work discipline, but it's a pretty good landing pad for somebody who wants to write. I remember when I got a communication that Kevin Barry was going to read a story of mine on the Stinging Fly podcast. I couldn't believe it. There are little moments like that, and there are a lot of them within the Irish writing scene. And I found that since I've come to Cork, just a lot of like goodwill and solidarity and a bit of crack along the way, and it's important. There's that aspect to it, that you have somewhere to channel that energy when you start writing, somewhere to submit to, and submitting. I always took it that it's very hard to finish stories or essays. So I would pick the deadline, whatever, January the 6th or like July the 17th, and I would see it there as something to aim for, and I would just finish the story and submit it. I saw it very much on my own terms then. Like, I had done what I set out to do. I'm very quietly stubborn, because there'll be a lot of rejections along the way, and some of the rejections are because the work's not good enough or the work's not finished, or sometimes it's just the wrong magazine at the wrong time. So it's very, very important to keep, you have to keep your own sense of what you're at. And I think it's the same with publishing industry in general. I would think that it's a kind of like a big wash of sea, and you better be able to just hold your own in terms of your mental strength, because it's not always easy, but also in terms of like, why are you writing and what do you want to write, so that you never find yourself, I suppose it's my worst nightmare, having done something and realising that it wasn't what you wanted to do.
And would you have any advice to give young writers today who are just starting out, trying to find their feet and stuff in the creative industry?
I do think that what I would say is to separate them in your mind. They're two different things. Writing is very solitary. It's an extreme relationship with yourself in many ways. It needs a lot of food in terms of reading and being in the world. Ultimately, you're going to protect very carefully your mental state and the food you give your brain, and you're going to protect what it is you want to write. And then there's something totally different called publishing, whereby that is a business model. There's, as I say, a lot of supportive, kind of in between scenarios in Ireland. There's a lot of support from the Arts Council for the small magazines and so on. But outside of that very protective arena, it's a business. For me, it has certainly helped to keep them very separate.
Do you have any advice for older writers who might be starting out in their career?
Oh, get going. get going, do what you want to do, and you're also you're not waiting in the way that you might wait in your 20s and 30s in a sort of like limbo room for life to start happening. It's here, it's now, and I think there's a huge freedom in being any age, but certainly, yeah, you just go for it.
Is there anything that you would like to add to this that I haven't asked, but it's on your mind?
Again, it just comes back to I'm looking forward to. I kind of feel I'm just finding my feet with things now, and I'm just really looking forward to all of the time ahead this year. The teaching the MA and maybe getting some event and reading. I mean, this is a very beautiful time with that sense of hope and daffodils coming out. And yeah, I'm just very excited for the rest of 2022 in Cork.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.